I walked into places, assumed I knew more than grown adults who had entire lives and cultures and beliefs and values. And I walked into those settings with the confidence of a terrified 15-year-old, the fear of what if I'm getting any of this wrong. Deeply offensive. I mean, my brother had nearly died. After one of my trips, half my hair had fallen out because we didn't have any food for the whole 2 months. We didn't eat any protein. We ate rice and green beans for 2 whole months. I ended up sleeping in my sleeping bag under the payphones. My parents were finally like, no, you're done. You're never going back. You're never going to be allowed to do a trip. You can't do an internship. You can't be an intern. There's a lot of worrying things in the world, but Teen Mania and I was always scared all the time.
Mine is the only voice.
Wow.
What have I been doing?
Lay down my autonomy.
After that, it got very dark very quickly.
Hey, my name is Shalise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening and you'd like to see our faces, go to YouTube at Cults to Consciousness. The very best way to support the podcast, as always, liking, sharing, commenting, interacting with the post. And when you leave those words of encouragement, it means so much to our guests. They are real people, guys, sharing their stories. We did release channel memberships. If you want special YouTube-specific perks, that is finally available. You can check that out. It's really easy to join a tier. They all have special perks and badges, even special live streams depending on the tier if you want to support the podcast. So today's guest, I was so happy to be connected to her. She was on the Shiny Happy People 2 documentary, her and her brother. We do have an interview with her brother coming as well. Excited to speak with him. And now I'm really looking forward to getting her perspective on her individual experiences going on those mission trips, her experience at Teen Mania, her experience with the internships, and everything that she had to unravel after her parents put a stop to it. So thank you so much for joining us, Liz Boltz Ranfeld.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to join you to talk today.
Yes, so awesome. So let's just get right into what has been the reaction since the release.
I didn't see it beforehand, so several hours after it was released, I got to sit down and watch it with some friends. I was so glad I watched it with some friends. It really, made it a very social and encouraging environment. But I had already heard from a lot of people that I know who were either involved with Teen Mania or they were kind of like on the cusp of it. Maybe they went to an Acquire the Fire, or they wanted to go on a global expeditions trip and weren't able to. And I've gotten very positive feedback from people I know. I haven't gotten much feedback from people I don't know, so I don't know how they feel about it.
Yeah. So let's just dive right in then. Let's talk about your childhood. Basically, your day-to-day, how invested was your family in church? What kind of family were you? What type of denomination? Just so we can get an idea of your background.
So I grew up attending a small, rural, non-denominational, kind of charismatic church in Indiana. And we were there my parents started going there about the time I was born. And it was maybe 200 people in the congregation, very, very friendly, warm, welcoming place. I felt very safe as a child there, but it was kind of small and there wasn't a lot of youth activity. And there were some youth activities, but when Acquire the Fire and Teen Mania came to town, suddenly it was a lot more exciting. And so church went from being like this nice, safe place I went to being something really, really exciting.
Yeah, so something that I failed to mention in the intro, Shiny Happy People 2 is not related to the Duggar family like Shiny Happy People 1 or the IBLP. It's focused on Teen Mania, this huge conglomeration of events that funneled kids into these certain things, basically creating these warriors for Jesus. And to me, from an outside perspective, it seemed like maybe it started with positive intentions and then it turned into a money grab and exploiting teens and a lot of very questionable practices with these teenagers and really intense stuff. If you watch the documentary, I could feel it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel so much anxiety and I wasn't even there. So yes, we're talking about the fabric of the teen universe within this huge corporation run by one guy, run by teens, really, but headed up by one guy. So, Teen Mania, explain from your perspective when you went to the first Acquire the Fire, what was that like for you?
I mean, I was so young. I was probably 11 or 12 at my first Acquire the Fire. And it was at the local high school field house, smaller than a stadium, but still really big event space. And it was so fun and exciting. My sister had my older sister, who's 7 years older than me. She was the first one in our family to find out about Teen Mania. And she attended what was called Beach Bash. So before Acquire the Fire, there were these events called Beach Bash. And Ron Luce would come in on his motorcycle, and they'd be held, at a reservoir or a lake. And youth groups might come, or maybe it'd only be a small group. And he would preach, and it was exciting. And he would promote the mission trips that they encourage people to go on. And so my older sister went. And so for me to see it, it was what all the cool older kids were into. I idolized my older sister. I finally, when I got to go to that first Acquire the Fire, I was so excited to finally be getting to do what all of the older, cooler Christian youth group kids were into. And it was really, really exciting.
Yeah. So I'm watching the footage of these events, and I think what's tricky is anytime you're doing these type of events for the youth, you really have the opportunity, for better or for worse, to completely mold these kids and their personalities and their thoughts and opinions and beliefs. And I obviously think that's the point. But what you can do with that is, unfortunately, people can have nefarious intentions. And it seems like they were creating these soldiers that they wanted to go out and influence politics or influence law. These kids who were about to grow up to become influential leaders, they wanted to arm them with, this is what you need to think, this is what you need to believe, and this is what you need to enact change for. And so when I'm watching the footage of these events and you see these kids breaking down and crying, and I mean, there's something to be said about, this is a term I learned from GMS, one of our recent guests, collective effervescence, where everybody is just high because of the emotions. And there really is something to be said about group energy and how it can be cathartic and how it can be revelatory and how it can make you feel high, and group therapy too, right? So
Yeah.
you have these kids and they're sobbing and they're giving their lives. And from one perspective, I can absolutely see nothing wrong with that, about guiding children in a productive, healthy mentality in a way that they feel like they are doing something for the world and being productive citizens of society. I love that. And then on the other hand, I was like, this feels like spiritual manipulation to me. And it kind of made me feel a little icky inside. So I want to know from your perspective, because I haven't actually been to one, looking back on it, how do you feel like it was either a positive or a negative or both kind of experience?
I will say that I know in hindsight that Teen Mania was political from day one. It didn't feel like politics to me as a kid. It felt very much like the main message that I was internalizing was, everyone is going to hell around you that you care about, and you better do everything you can to stop it. I think that's an inherently negative message to put on children.
Yeah.
And so, especially the guilt, like that you should feel guilty if you're not doing everything you possibly can, then it's your fault if they end up in hell. Like, just, it is kind of your fault. So I would say that is inherently negative. I don't think there's a problem with kids getting together who share values and beliefs and having a really good time and being part of that. I think that there are opportunities for that. I'm sure there are some healthy ways for that to happen. I think from the very beginning, there were ideas that were central to Teen Mania's mission that were damaging from day one. So I was having lots and lots of fun. I was enjoying my experience very much. And there was a constant low level anxiety and fear about, and it was low level at first. It eventually becomes not low level, fear and anxiety about about eternity and what's going to happen and what suffering you are or are not helping to stop from happening.
Yeah. And not only from an eternal perspective, but in a day-to-day, it seemed like the core message was Armageddon is coming and you will be expected to, at gunpoint, say you believe in God and potentially die as a martyr. And that seems incredibly scary and very real. Not just maybe when we die, something bad will happen. It's be prepared. You have to be a soldier, a literal soldier for God, and you will probably die for it.
Yeah. And I think that became more intense as Teen Mania went on. It was definitely part of it. It wouldn't be uncommon as a kid to be asked now if this were like when the Christians were thrown to the lions in the Colosseum, would you have renounced faith, or would you have been brave enough to be slayed and eaten by the lions? So that was more like the language that was used when I was a kid. And then once Columbine happened, of course, when we had more, what would you do if you were confronted with a gun, if you were confronted with someone who is going to kill you for your faith? That never felt like that was on my likely path. But there were lots of people in my circle who did feel that was on their likely path. And so I was just kind of surrounded with that idea, even if it wasn't on the forefront of my fears.
That makes sense. So let's talk about how you got involved in these mission trips. And I know you went on a few. So where do we start?
Teen Mania at Acquire the Fire conventions promotes the missions trips, the Global Expeditions missions trips, a lot. And my sister had already been on one or two with Teen Mania. My brother was able to go. And so when I turned 14, my parents didn't want me to go when I was 13. So when I was 14, I was finally going to be old enough to go. Teen Mania let kids go when they were 13, but they had me hold off. So I finished middle school, and then I was able to go on my first trip with them. And I went to Australia for a month. And
fun. Wait, was it
fun?
Oh,
yeah. It was actually, the Australia trip was so fun. I mean, what kid doesn't want to be 14 years old traveling without their parents? And you get to have like a whole new identity too, because like, middle school's hard. You feel like everybody at home knows you and knows all the embarrassing things you've ever done. And here it's a whole new group of people. You all believe the same things, basically. You're doing work that you're told is very, very, very important. You're also having a lot of fun. There's team building exercises, and there's international travel, and there's interesting foods, and you go to see places you've never seen before. So that was my first trip. I went on 2 more trips with Teen Mania before my parents put a stop to it. Immediately after that, I found another group that was very similar to keep going on the similar kind of trips. So I went on 5 missions trips as a teenager. So basically from the time I was 14 till after I graduated from high school.
Okay. So the mission trips that were run by Teen Mania, what were the main objectives or goals, or what did they have you actually doing when you went out?
I would say the goal was, when we say get people saved, we mean keep them out of hell. So the day-to-day activity of that depended on what kind of trip you were on. So 2 of my trips were drama trips, which means that we were doing, I don't know, maybe they were 15 minutes long, these little evangelical dramas that had an allegory. There were a couple of different ones. One had an allegory of a ship. One had an allegory of like a person who is like journeying and trying out all the different things the world has to offer to try to get rid of his guilt. And each one contains a creator God, Jesus son character who sacrifices for the main character. And then everyone in the play has the opportunity to either accept or reject God at the end. So you would go out and do that drama 4, 5, 6 times a day. You do some funny skits beforehand. You do the drama. One person would then get up and give their testimony. In some countries, you would have a translator if necessary. And then after that, your ministry group would go out into whatever the crowd was and talk to as many people as possible and try to get them to pray what we call the prayer of salvation, which is a pretty orthodox part of evangelical Christianity. I'm a sinner and I'm separated from you, and I confess of my sins, and I promise to follow you. And this is the key to getting into heaven, is praying this prayer. We would then collect people's contact information, and hopefully that information was then shared with a local church who was supposed to follow up with these individuals and get them connected with resources. So that was the main part. That was what most of the trips were. I also participated in what was called a church planting trip, which is where we traveled to one pretty remote village, 18 of us, and lived for the 2 whole months. And our responsibility was to plant a church. And we were supposed to, supposedly there were no Christians in the area, and we were supposed to build relationships, get invited to people's homes, share the message of Jesus, get them to pray the prayer of salvation, and then get them together so that they could start a church of their own. And I don't know the plan. I do not know what the plan was as far as like, were they going to have a pastor? Was a church going to work with them? I was just doing what I was supposed to do in the moment.
Yeah. Did you ever go to a place where it just, looking back, you're like, yeah, I don't know if we should have been trying to convert Buddhist monks or something? I noticed that was in the documentary, and I was just like, huh, interesting.
Oh, 100%. Okay, so I will reveal a little bit about my current thinking. I mean, I think that the vast majority of certainly conversion-based missions work is deeply problematic and is rooted in some really racist and awful history and beliefs. So like, that's just where I come from now. So to have participated in it is a very uncomfortable reality to go, okay, what do I do with the fact that I walked into places, assumed I knew more than grown adults who had entire lives, and cultures and beliefs and values, and I walked into those settings with the confidence of a terrified 15-year-old. And I bring up that contrast on purpose because it was like there was all this confidence and you're doing the right thing, and also like the fear of what if I'm getting any of this wrong. So the pressure, and yeah, it was deeply offensive. We were engaged in, I mean, that's terrible. That's a terrible thing to do.
Yeah, I do think there's a lot of audacity in sending
Audacity is a great word for it.
sending privileged, I assume mostly white kids to other countries to tell them, you guys are doing it wrong. This is how you do it. Watch us in our little dramatization. Now you're saved. You're welcome. Bye.
Bye. Oh yeah. Okay, so the first time I had a TikTok do well, like I'm not big on TikTok, but I've had a few that have done well. The first time I had one that I was like, oh my gosh, people are watching that, is I told the story of being in Australia and being sent door to door to invite people to the drama, and being so shy. I mean, I was deeply shy and insecure. I mean, I was very nervous. Teen Mania offered me a lot of confidence, which I think is one of the things that drew me to it as well, because it was one place where I felt more confident than other places. So I'm going door to door and I'm inviting people to come see this drama, and we're in a small group, and we're like, come to the park and see our skit. And I'm just imagining them calling each other and being like, you know, their friends, and be like, there's some kind of cult in the park, and they're children. There's children coming to our door, because I was a young looking 14. There are children coming to our door. We need to go see what's happening there, because you know, this is not right. So that's a little like that. There's some arrogance to that. But then there are other situations where it's not as easy to laugh off. I tell in the documentary this story of, after a drama, being put in a position to pray for a woman who's either she had a club foot or her leg was one shorter than the other. I mean, there was something, she had a physical disability, and we were expected to pray for her and heal her. There was a lot of signs and wonders language going on. So we're in a group. We ask her if we can pray. She says yes. I mean, most curious people might. I mean, I'm not surprised that she said yes. Like, it was a spectacle. We start to pray, and you know, we ask if we can lay hands on her, and she says yes. We're working with a translator. We're praying and praying. Nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. And at a certain point, you're like, okay, I've never actually seen this happen, but I've been told if I believe, then it will happen. So am I just supposed to stay here and keep believing that it will happen? If I give up, am I giving up on this? And I remember feeling so awful afterwards, because eventually we did quit praying. We did get on the bus. They said, it's time to go. You have to go. So we get on the bus to go to the next spot. And I remember feeling so guilty, because it was like none of us had enough faith to heal her. it occurred to me later that maybe one of the reasons we expected her to be healed is because, and I didn't know this at the time, there's faith healers who set up fake healing events will often use the one leg is shorter than the other. I don't know about often, but it has been documented that they have done this. There's like a little sleight of hand. There's like a little, like, that is a thing that can be faked. And so we had all grown up hearing stories of faith healers who had specifically gotten people's legs to grow out.
Yeah.
Like that specific miracle we had heard over and over again. So I think that's part of it too, is because it was like, this was a miracle that people are supposed to do. People are supposed to be able to do this miracle. And later I was like, oh, those were probably fake stories that I had heard, you know, at a certain point you go, oh, those probably weren't real stories.
Yeah.
Those were probably faith healers being tricky, which then gets into your mind. So then you encounter someone with an actual disability and you think, I can heal that person. Anyway, it really messed with your head.
Well, yeah, because you don't get on the bus thinking, oh, I wonder why God didn't heal this person. You're thinking, I wonder why God didn't think I had enough faith to heal this person. It's always you. You're the problem.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I'm going to add like a little tangential context that I think is interesting to this conversation. My parents actually were in a Word of Faith cult when they were young, before any of us were born.
What is that?
A Word of Faith movement was heavily influenced by Hobart Freeman and William Branham, who were evangelists and preachers all through the 20th century. And they believed in no doctors, no medicine. If you wore glasses, you didn't have enough faith that God was going to heal your vision. If you went to the doctor, if you took insulin, if you went to the hospital to have a baby, all of these things were a sign of lack of faith.
Ooh.
And my parents left when my mom was pregnant with my oldest sister, and she was seeing people die, and she was seeing children die, and she was seeing pregnant people die. And so they left because she was like, I'm having my baby in a hospital. I'm having my baby in a safe environment with doctors. And my parents had no idea. I don't think they had any idea of the things that were happening on the missions trips that paralleled so closely with that like faith healing idea. I think they thought we were just, you know, going on good, wholesome missions trips and being passionate for the Lord. And I don't think they had any idea of things like us praying for the same things. They had left that because they knew it wasn't okay. And then we were, you know, 15 years later, 20 years later, perpetuating that same idea. So, yeah.
And your dad was a bit of a celebrity in this space.
Yeah. My brother Phil and I were both in the documentary. And it was funny because when the director first reached out to me over email, she sent me a link to a TikTok I had done and said, hey, I'm from Shiny Happy People. I was wondering if you might be interested in willing to have a conversation with me. And I replied and I said, well, is this about Teen Mania? Because that was what my TikTok had been about that she sent me. I said, or is this about my dad? And she goes, who's your dad? And I was like, oh, I was like,
that
okay,
director was like, score.
I know. I couldn't believe it all came together the way it did. And so I told her, I said, well, my dad is Ray Boltz, who was a very successful Christian musician. His career was at its height in the 90s, right parallel with Teen Mania. And he was definitely not a household name nationwide, but in Christian circles, he was a pretty big deal.
Yeah. How did that affect you, being his daughter?
Well, he got famous around the time. He started getting famous in Christian circles when I was coming into awareness. You know, like, you know, you're 5, 6, 7 years old, and you're like, oh, everyone is looking at my dad, and I'm going to my dad's concerts, and wow, all these people are here to see him, and this is so cool. I will say that the way that Ron Luce taught everyone is watching you all the time. God is watching you. Everyone is watching you. Don't make any mistakes, or you're gonna possibly distract someone from hearing the true message of God. Don't sin, because people will see you as a hypocrite and then they won't get saved, or they might fall away. The everyone is watching you narrative. It didn't help that everyone was watching us. We felt very much on display. A lot of times you'd go out to dinner and people would be staring. People would come up for autographs during meals. You'd try to not let people know on the mission. You'd try to get on your trip and not let people know that you were Ray Boltz's kid because it was kind of uncomfortable and awkward. And yet somebody would bring it up and then you'd hear people asking about it. And then they'd say, "Are you really Ray Boltz's kid?" And they'd be like, "What's that like? How much money do you make? What kind of place do you live in? Do you get special treatment? Do you get to go to these things? What other celebrities do you know?" By the way, I knew no other Christian. We knew no other Christian celebrities. We didn't know anybody. I didn't know anybody. You did feel very, very watched. And people would come up to you and be like, "Oh, I met you at," and then they would have this like very specific thing. And you'd be like, "I don't remember meeting this person." Because it's like people had a reason to remember you and you didn't necessarily have, and it wasn't a bad thing, but it was just oh, I feel like everybody knows who I am and is watching me. That was a lot of pressure as well.
Yeah. I think there's the whole celebrity aspect of someone just noticing you because you're famous or you're related to someone famous. And then there's the aspect of someone noticing you because you're famous or your family is famous and they have this expectation of you to act and be a certain way because they know what you believe in and how you're supposed to act. And so it adds this extra layer of not only do they know you, but they're judging you.
Right. And they're going to tell other people about it. And, as an adult, I've realized none of that matters. I've realized, like, who cares if someone notices what I do and says, "I saw Ray Boltz's daughter do." I mean,
Yeah.
okay. But as a young person where, kids are very, there's a self-centeredness that is a developmental reality. So it's real hard to be a fairly shy kid who feels watched cosmically and very locally.
So you never were an intern at the Honor Academy, but talk about how Teen Mania was your whole life.
Oh yeah, Teen Mania I lived for the summer trips. It was all I thought about. I used to ask for Christmas, I would ask for calling cards so that I could call my Teen Mania trip friends and long distance, because of course it was the 90s and that's how you could call long distance. And, the Choir of the Fire convention would come around in March, but we would also host the ministry team that put on the conventions. They're featured in the docuseries as well. We would host them. So we might have 20 kids staying at our house and they were, so cool. I had crushes on every one of them. I thought they were all so fascinating and interesting. I wanted to be them. And we would host them usually a couple times a year. And then if there were special events, like I went to day one, so that was, an additional event during the year. And then my youth group experience, it was all just chasing the high of Teen Mania. So it was such a big part of my life. I spent all year fundraising for my trips. My journals are filled with just, "I really miss so-and-so. I miss being on the missions field. No one here understands me. The only people that understand me are my Teen Mania friends." And at some point, I know I wrote it down in a diary. Like my life plans, my life goals were graduate from high school, go to the internship at the Honor Academy, do at least I wanted to do 1 year and then do a second year, which was the graduate internship.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to do a second year. Then I would go to college and then I would come back and work at Teen Mania or be a missionary, one or the other. So like it was, I mean, as like a 16-year-old, 15, 16, I saw Teen Mania as like my entire future.
Now, were you in public school?
I was in public school, yeah.
Okay, because I wondered how isolated you were within this bubble.
My parents didn't want to send us to Christian school. They thought it was really important for us to just be in public school. We've always been like a pro-public school family. To this day, I'm very pro-public school. I went to a very small elementary school, 1 class per grade, and almost everybody was Christian. We all kind of shared very similar backgrounds. As I got more involved with Teen Mania and the local youth groups who very much supported Teen Mania, I mean, I was in school every day, but who was I sitting with? My other youth group and Christian friends. Teen Mania preached like revival. God's going to like there's going to be this huge revival in your schools. And we would do things like we met before school. There were maybe 10 or 15 of us. We would meet in this one hallway before school every day to pray before school started. And then somebody had a vision that we were supposed to do what we called a Joshua walk, which, like, so in the Bible, when Joshua marches around the city under God's command, it's been a long time. I'm not going to have the story right. However many times, like every day. And then on the 7th time, they walk around 7 times and they blow the trumpets and the walls come tumbling down. I mean, it's a kind of story you hear as a kid in Sunday school. Well, somebody had a vision that we were supposed to do that, and then the spiritual walls would come tumbling down. So we would show up to school an hour early, and we refused to wear shoes because we said that it was holy ground. And we would march around the school every morning, and then on the 7th morning, we marched 7 times, and then we cheered and screamed, and this was all supposed to bring in revival. So we kind of ostracized ourselves a little bit. Like, we made ourselves the weirdos in school. Like, I think people thought I was nice. I was friendly. I had friends in multiple friend groups, but
you probably relished in that. You relished in being different because you were choosing it actively, and you were purposely saying it's us versus you guys, and we want you to become us. But until then, we're the ones doing it right, and we have to teach you our ways.
Yes. There was another friend that grew up in a totally different, very strict Christian environment. And it was so funny because he grew up very Pentecostal and very rigid. And we both thought the other one's, like, we're good friends now, but in high school, we both thought the other one wasn't doing the right thing. Like, because, in his church, all the women wore skirts and had long hair and followed these really rigid rules. And I was like, you don't have to do that. That's not what real Christians have to do. And then, but he's looking and they're too obsessed with the world. And I'm thinking he's too legalistic. And really, we were just part of the same big ecosystem.
Yeah. So how old were you when Columbine happened, and how did that affect your view of being this soldier for God?
Yeah. I would have been, a sophomore in high school? I think a sophomore in high school. And I was at day 1, which is featured in the docuseries. I remember being at school the next week, and people were very anxious and worried, and there was a lot of fear, and a lot of us were freaked out. But several of us in that circle, we ended up feeling like we were doing good work because we would pray with people, and people found that, it seemed like people found that comforting. And so for us, it was like this moment to try to say, we shouldn't be afraid. We should trust God. We heard the kind of martyr stories. I think it took a little while for those to sink in. I was more freaked out by the idea of school shooter than I was Christian martyr. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so at least that's how I remember it.
I noticed in the documentary, they said that one of the victims, one of the girls who had been shot and killed, had been asked at gunpoint if she believed in God, but then it turned out not to be true. And I think how sad that we, or whoever it was that made up that rumor for whatever gain they wanted, they're using that story to manipulate the youth, and how disrespectful and how sad that that's how people twist it for their own agendas.
Yeah. And I think Ron Luce, president of Teen Mania, I think he saw that opportunity, the fact that Rachel Scott was the victim who had presumably been asked. There were a couple who were described as being asked if they believed in God. She was the one that had been planning on going on a Teen Mania trip, and she had written a support letter. I don't know if she was officially signed up or not, but she had said in this support letter to raise funds that she was going to go with Teen Mania. That became such just this very emotional pull to people who weren't already sucked into the missions. Like, I was already all on board. I was going regardless. But now there was this whole new group of people that he had the opportunity to recruit, because it was a very emotional thing to say, she doesn't get to go. Will you go in her place? Who's going to go in her place? And it is, and it's very, that's very, like you said, it's a manipulation. She didn't consent to any of that. And how much did people benefit from the explosion in participants because of that messaging?
Yeah, I think you're right in that he just saw that as a marketing opportunity instead of holding a sacred space for what had actually happened and taking a moment to grieve and to just take the time to give students a space to feel their feelings instead of using that sadness and turning it into this fear and hatred for the outside world or whoever enemy they claimed it was. And that's what I noticed throughout was there was this invisible enemy, this force that you had to battle with. And I'm like, who are you even fighting? No one's persecuting you. Why are you so angry? It didn't make sense.
You have just hit on one of the first things that started making it all fall apart for me, is that idea of, wait, I don't think anyone's actually after us. I was trying to look at like all of the talk of like, you're going to be persecuted, you're going to be, and I was like, no one persecuted me on my trips. On my trips, we were just a curiosity, or we were obnoxious.
Yeah.
And there was no persecution. And I was like, I mean, I may have annoyed people in high school, but no one was mean to me over it.
Nobody cared.
And nobody cared. Right. That was just the weird thing Liz was into. Somebody else would have been into something else. But then also I will say that on my missions trips, I was seeing parts of the world that obviously I had never seen before. I don't know how you go to a place that's been affected by generations of colonization, generations of exploitation. And I don't know how you go there and not start seeing signs of it and be like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, it was the Christians that did that. Or it was the system that did that. It was the Europeans. It was the Americans. And you start going, wait a minute. Oh, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel good, but I think.
Yeah, maybe we're the bad guy.
Yes.
Maybe we're the ones trying to erase culture and wipe out, these genocides that have been caused by white Christians trying to conquer. And anyways, that's a whole discussion.
Well, it is because I was in India on my last trip with any organization. This wasn't with Teen Mania, but it was basically like Teen Mania light. And there was a woman that came to, she said she was a prophetess. She was from New Zealand. I still don't know who this lady was. She was just this old lady that came to pray for us at the YWCA where we were staying. And she started praying and she started saying all of these horrible things about these countries I had spent time in and that I had loved. I mean, I had really liked being in those places. I had liked the food. I had liked the noise. I had liked the music. I had liked the people. I had liked, I was not cut out for the heat, but like aside from that, I loved so much of it. And so then she's saying, this is a dark and evil continent and the demons are just oppressing. And I'd heard that language before, but for some reason, as I'm listening to her do this, the demons are oppressing these people and there's this spirit of apathy and they don't care about anything. And we're going to break through and we're going to protect these kids, these kids being us, from the evil spirits. And I just found myself getting really red in the face and really defensive. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on. This is what I'm thinking. I'm not saying it. I wasn't bold enough to say it, but I just went, what are you talking about? It's not that bad. Like, it's not dark and demonic and depressing and evil. There's poverty.
Yeah.
There are hard things to see here, but I really felt defensive of the places that I had been, and I felt defensive of the people I had talked to. And that shift in me realizing I needed to defend them, I mean, that's still very me-centered, but it was the shift that it was at the time. I felt a need to defend them from people like me. I felt the need to like stand and go, wait a minute, I don't want you to talk about people like that. I don't want you to talk about cultures like that. And it was a big crack in the wall.
Yeah, it just shows that you can't send teenagers to a bunch of places all over the world and not expect them to start to catch on to something, because you have eyes and you can, even if you're still in that culty mindset of I need to save them because that's what you've been ingrained into doing, is the superiority complex of we're better, we need to save you. You can still see and hold compassion for these people and be like, wait a second, this doesn't feel right to me because they seem happy. They seem like they have a beautiful life. And why would I condemn them just because they're different? And that's really what it boils down to, is you're different, therefore you need to change and be like us, or you're not going to be saved. And I think that's where the audacity comes in of who's to say that you have the right answers, right?
I am so grateful that Teen Mania taught us to and made us write everything down. They were like big into journaling and note keeping and take notes during sermons and write down everything. And I was very good at, like, I was very obedient in that way, because I can go back and I can see where these shifts were happening, and I can see these little moments, and I can see my true commitment to these ideas, and also a little hint through most of it of like, something's not adding up. I don't know what it is. I wholeheartedly believe all of this, but something is also, there's, it's like I've got the wrong puzzle piece. It's not like that there's a missing piece. It's like it kind of fits. It kind of fits, but it's not quite the right piece. What is happening? And then that's the thing with the docuseries too, is like, they taught us all to keep track of everything. So everybody involved, there is so much documentation of this organization, and we have videos, and I loved seeing so many of the videos. I loved seeing so many of the pictures. I let them look through all of my diaries. That was very
Ooh, that's vulnerable.
Oh my gosh, it was. I gave them an entire suitcase of diaries and photo albums, and said, here you go, whatever you can learn from it, I hope you learn from it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I was shocked at the amount of footage.
I was too.
The ESOL events, and I know we're going to talk about this with your brother Phil, but I was just like, holy cow, people were out there with cameras. And it's kind of shocking because of what they were doing to people, and they're taking videos.
I know. That's the thing. Everybody thought that it was just completely justified and righteous. So of course you document it. I wish there was more footage. I get jealous of, I have a teenager, and he's got all these photos and videos of all of his friends doing all kinds of things. I'm like, I'm so jealous, because they have so much video, and I'm like, I wish I had video of, my missions trips and things. But it was very surreal watching the series. There would be a moment I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's I was there. I was in that moment. Like, I was in that. And I know them. I saw the boy I loved all through high school. I haven't seen a video of him in my whole life. And I see him in there and I go, ah! I shouted.
Yeah.
My husband goes, well, I know who that was.
So let's talk about why you were not able to live out your teenage dreams of going to this internship, the Honor Academy, and doing everything you wanted to do at Teen Mania.
I was going to go spend a weekend down at Teen Mania's campus to visit my friends. And you would fly into Dallas-Fort Worth, which is, of course, a huge airport. And campus was, maybe 2 hours away. And I was going to visit my friend. And this was, I think it was the first time I was flying alone. I mean, I'd flown alone to get to campus before, but it was the first time I was flying, like, there was no organization to meet me. My friend was just going to meet me. And I don't think I gave her the flight information. And because I didn't really think about how big, she knew about what time I was getting there, but I don't think I told her what airline I was on or I didn't know what terminal I was just like, I'm arriving at this time. And so it was like at 10:30 at night, and she drove, but she couldn't find me because it's the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. How is she going to find me? We can't call each other. There's no phones. I was 16 or 17. She had a very legitimate worry that if she was out past curfew, she would get in huge trouble. And you see in the docuseries how you can't get in trouble. It's really bad if you get in trouble. So she went back to campus, and I was just at the airport.
She just left you?
She and I have never talked about it. We haven't stayed really connected. I mean, I think we're Facebook friends and everything, but like, I have only positive feelings for her. But I think she was just like, what else am I going to do? She has to go back. That's the rules. She has to go back. So it's late. I'm calling my mom. I'm like, I didn't get from a payphone. I didn't get picked up. I don't know where my friend is. So I'm calling Teen Mania. They have one phone per dorm hall. And so I'm calling it over and over, but it's late at night. No one is answering. No one is coming out to the hallway to answer. So I'm not able to get in touch with her. We had the number because my brother had been an intern, and it's shows how tenacious my brother and I were with Teen Mania, that after he nearly died on his trip, which I'm sure you will talk to him about that. It's in the docuseries. Mm-hmm. After he nearly died, my parents didn't put a stop to it then. We still convinced them to let us keep participating. But At this point, my brother had been an intern. He had finished his internship year. So we're calling the guardhouse. And the guy in the guardhouse, the intern that answers, he's like, I can't wake anybody up because my supervisor on shift tonight is a woman and I can't go into the dorm. I'm not allowed to go into the women's dorm to wake her up. So there's nothing I can do. I was at the airport all night. A taxi driver came and sat down next to me and was like, starts chatting me up. And he's like, well, I could come back. I get off my shift at 3 a.m. I could come back and just drive you out there for free. I'll take you out to campus. I know where that is.
That sounds sketchy.
Oh, yeah. And so I said, well, I'd have to ask my mom. And I'm going, this is perfect. I'll call my mom. She'll tell me no. And then I can tell him my mom says no, because I didn't know how to say no. And I call my mom and my mom's like, do not get in a taxi with some random person at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And I said, and then I felt bad because I freaked her out because she thought that I was really about to get in this taxi with this person. I ended up sleeping in my sleeping bag under the payphones outside of the baggage claim. I was inside in the baggage claim area at the airport. Someone eventually came and got me the next day. I had a wonderful time on campus. I thought everything was fine. And when I came home, my parents were like, absolutely not, you're done. And I was like, what? I mean, my brother had nearly died. After one of my trips, half my hair had fallen out because we didn't have any food for the whole 2 months. We didn't eat any protein. We ate rice and green beans for 2 whole months and pears and occasionally some Vienna sausages and eggs. So like my brother had a terrible experience at the internship. And this was the thing that my parents were finally like, no, you're done. You're never going back. You're never going to be allowed to do a trip. You can't do an internship. You can't be an intern. And to say I was devastated is an understatement. It was awful.
Yeah, you had been primed for this.
Yes.
Since those events, you had been primed. You were ready. You were just waiting for the day that you could go and give your life.
Oh gosh, I was so angry and so hurt. And like I said, I immediately started looking for another organization to travel with because I was like, well, I still have to go on my mission trips. It was very difficult for me to not go back. I had planned on going back to the same country on the same kind of church planning trip with the same people, and losing that was really hard. I was so ready for it. And then losing the idea of the internship and I guess I could have gone to it, but my parents weren't going to help pay for it. I was I was pretty obedient. If they said, obedience was a big deal. That's addressed in the series too. And if they said I couldn't, I wasn't going to be like, I'm going to. So that was the end. It was immediate. I got back and I never was allowed to do anything with them again.
And I know that being out of that environment, out of that headspace is what allowed you to finally see things for what it was. So let's talk about that deconstruction.
Sure. So there were kind of 2 different deconstruction paths of my Teen Mania experience. One was being away from Teen Mania long enough to actually be willing to view some of the things that had happened to me critically, right? So a few times when there had just been, some hurtful things that had happened, not super traumatic. I wasn't in, a lot of the things in the docuseries. They wouldn't make a good fit for it because they were just smaller moments of pain, just little moments of hurt. And once I was out of it, I actually started to be able to go, oh, that wasn't just an accident. That person was making bad choices that was in charge, or it's actually really bad that they didn't feed us on that trip. And we were responsible for buying our own food, sort of like the team was kind of responsible. And we hiked all of this food into this village. And then we didn't contribute at all to the local economy because we just brought all our own food in, but all we brought was canned green beans. And I was like, oh, an adult should have actually been in charge of that. And so there were little things where I started questioning it or acknowledging it. But then there was another path where I started realizing, no, the things that we were doing were actually bad and harmful. And then first it started with the things I was doing on my mission trips were harmful, which I think we've already covered a little bit. And then it became, oh no, Teen Mania is hurting people. It's hurting a lot of people. People are emerging from these programs very damaged and traumatized. And even if it's only a percentage, it's always a percentage, even if it is a minority, the people that are coming out of that, it really matters. And a healthy, positive organization wouldn't be creating so many people who were so damaged from those experiences. And so once I was out of it, I was able to start having both of those realizations, to the point that so my last trip with them was in 1999. When I was in college, I had a blog. It was, 2001, 2002. And I just started talking shit about Teen Mania on it all the time. I'd name people. I'd be like, this person was a jerk. It was like early. I didn't know what SEO was, but I was like, maybe someone will Google their name someday. And they'll say, I mean, it was very immature. And I put at the little bottom, this is also not the best strategy, not the most. I put at the bottom, like my little website, I had Teen Mania, America's greatest soul-sucking organization. So it only took a few years for me to like flip a switch and be like,
Yeah.
these guys are the worst. When Battle Cry happened, I was able to do some media interviews and to share kind of, I was like one of the only people that they could find who was publicly talking about on the internet with my name that what they were doing was not good. And so it was in the docuseries, there's this clip where Ron Luce is on the O'Reilly Factor. And I believe he was debating Sansara Taylor, who's an activist. And I remember watching it because I had just talked to her on the phone and like tried to give some context for what Teen Mania was and Acquire the Fire. And so the latter half of the series, the docuseries, I was observing all of that. I was involved in all of that, but it was from the critical side. And so it was very interesting to see the docuseries tell that story of how people started kind of standing up to and challenging what Teen Mania was doing.
That's cool that you were a part of that behind the scenes.
Yeah, it was great. That's how I connected with Micah from the Recovering Alumni blog. So she reached out to me when she was still anonymous and said, I've seen your blog. Here's a blog I'm starting. And so I immediately jumped over and joined that community and was very happy to be to participate with that and see what she was able to do. She did amazing work. She was the heart of that public response.
Yeah, full 180 perspective
Yeah.
for you.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah.
We are interviewing Micah in a couple hours, actually. So
okay,
I'm
great.
really looking forward to hearing that perspective. So what was it like then? All of a sudden, you're a part of this Recovering Alumni blog and you're seeing firsthand all of these horror stories. Was it just further
Yeah.
confirmation? Were you shocked? Were you not that surprised?
There were always surprises. There were always things in those stories where you went, oh my gosh, I didn't know that happened. Oh my gosh, I didn't know this person's story. I wasn't surprised that people had these stories and these experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was watching and seeing it unfold as to, you started seeing certain names of certain people in leadership lots of times and coming into the story lots of times. And so I began to notice, like, I didn't necessarily have a bad experience with person so-and-so or the other person or whoever it was, but I knew enough and I'd encountered them enough that when I heard these stories about them, I was like, wow, this is a lot of harm done by these specific individuals. So there was the system and then there were specific individuals. And it was really heartbreaking to see the people that we had once looked up to and admired and respected and really listened to a lot of what they had to say, to realize the direct harm that they were causing. Because it was easy to excuse it at the beginning as like, oh, Teen Mania just grew too fast. Teen Mania, there's every organization has imperfect people. Every organization has people who make mistakes. And you started going, no, this is more than that. These are people in leadership making very specific decisions that are harming people. And it was like, they were okay with collateral. They were okay with, like, as long as most things were happening the way they wanted them to, they were okay if some people got really, really hurt. It didn't bother them.
Yeah. Without naming names, do you have any core memories of a specific story that really stood out to you?
I mean, the Esau stories were really upsetting. It's been a long time since I've read the Recovering Alumni blog. I know that it's just been brought back online after a hiatus of it not being published. So I want to go back and revisit some of those stories. Without naming names, I think hearing about times when people would get FaceTime with these leaders and say, here's what happened to me. Here's how I was hurt. The thing that stuck out to me is the number of times when those interactions would happen And people would be like, we are so sorry you were hurt. We hate that happened. Let's make it right. And then nothing would happen. That was so upsetting to just realize there's not oh, they didn't know. They knew.
Right. Where do you end up? I mean, clearly it's been years and years and years, but is there any other part of your story that you want to touch on as far as growing from the experience or looking back and shifting and pivoting to where you are now?
One of the things that the series talks about is our dad's journey. So we did not know growing up that our dad was gay. We did not. That was a deeply held secret for him. It wasn't one of those things where it's like, oh, people always knew. There was no like well-known secret sort of thing. It was the kind of thing he kept so close to him. I've always been so glad that we were out of the Teen Mania circle and we had kind of started to move away from a lot of the conservative and very evangelical beliefs. Because as we left Teen Mania, and I say we because it really was family, we were also leaving fundamentalism. We were also growing out of a very strict conservative upbringing. We were shifting politically, socially. We were having these shifts. And so when my dad came out to our family, because we were very worried about him, he was so unwell. When he came out to us, I had literally just come to the conclusion, like I was a senior in college at a Christian college, and it had been that year when I was like, wait a minute, I don't think it's a sin to be gay. I'd heard one person when I was in college in my Christian setting say that. And he was a guy I was studying in Spain with, and he was from another Christian college. And he had said that to me. And I was like, really? You don't think it's a sin? I knew that. I mean, I was all about like, you can be gay and Christian. Like I believed that already, but I didn't, I was like, oh, like you could believe that there's just nothing wrong with an orientation, that like an orientation or a gender identity is not inherently
evil,
sinful.
Yeah.
Evil, sinful, like that's just a fact. And so, and literature had gotten me there, books and stories and movies and listening to people's stories and being willing to have changed in one area and let go of one entire thing, like made me willing to let go of others.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the night that my dad came out, I remember saying, maybe God has been like preparing us for this, because we had started talking about this and my family there was just never a moment of question that we were going to support him and that we were going to be on his side and we were going to stand with him. He thought he would lose his family. He thought that was going to be the thing that was going to happen. And that's why he never was willing to come out, because he couldn't stand the idea of losing everything. He could lose his career. He could lose his standing. Those things he could say goodbye to, but he couldn't say goodbye to his family. And it just felt like there was so much dogma in what I had learned and what I had participated in. And there were so many rules and so much rigidity. And I am so glad that in those few years between leaving Teen Mania and my dad coming out just to our family, there had been an opportunity to reevaluate that and start questioning it. So that when my dad did come out, it was very easy. My whole family, I have 3 siblings. We all just immediately were like, oh, now we understand this. Everybody. And we love you and support you. And also we better start telling everybody in the church and in Christianity to get better on this, because they're harming people and we're going to start talking about it. And so it became a very public advocacy. And now, I mean, we've got, without revealing anybody's stories, I mean, my whole family, I mean, we've got all these grandkids, we've got all these kids, and it is an environment where all these kids can be themselves. And it is a family in 2025 with 10 grandchildren. There's some gay ones. There's some trans ones. Like it is 2025. Like, and these kids are getting to be raised in an environment that is accepting of whoever they are now, whoever they are in the future. And anyway, so that's the continuation of the story. Because you're a part of something at one point, you don't have to be part of it forever. And it is okay to just to learn and say, oh, I was wrong. I was wrong on that. And I'm going to change my mind on it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is literally just changing my mind on it and going, oh, I was wrong.
I think the bottom line is choosing love and acceptance over condemnation and judgment.
It's so much less scary in the world when you can let go of all of that fear that Teen Mania was pushing. The fear, I mean, there's a lot of worrying things in the world, but Teen Mania and I was always scared all the time of everything. As much as fun as I was having, I was always scared all the time. And I no longer feel like I'm always scared.
Yeah, that's amazing. So Teen Mania did eventually fall.
Yeah.
And now this documentary is talking about it. So what would you say is the main thing that you hope the documentary provides to the world?
I think that when you get caught up in a group like this, it's so easy for people to be dismissive of it, of your experience, and say, well, I wouldn't have fallen for it. I would have known better. I would have thought it was weird. I am happy that the series is showing why so many of us got sucked into it, and that it wasn't just a bunch of stupid kids getting tricked, but rather there was all of this money and all of this research and time and energy that was spent in like recruiting us and keeping us locked in. And so instead of feeling, I know that there have been people who have felt very guilty over their experiences. I've dealt with that, the guilt over what have I done as part of this? What have I promoted? What have I participated in? And you go, oh my gosh, how did I fall for that? And I think it's important for people to see about their own experiences or about someone else's. It's like, no, it is impressive, and there is fortitude and there is resilience and tenacity that people could be subjected to that kind of programming and training and brainwashing and manipulation and control. It's coming out of that is incredible. And so falling for something and getting tricked into something, which is often how it feels like I got tricked into this, is not a failure, especially when you consider the fact that people have been able to get out and leave it behind. And I think that I hope that people can see that too, where it's like some more empathy toward people who are caught up in these sorts of things, that it's not just, oh, you got suckered, but rather, wow, you got suckered, and then against all odds, you emerged from it. That's I think that's what I hope the series does for people.
Absolutely. And I think something that's been coming up a lot on this podcast lately is seeing the red flags and ignoring them, because you can also know that something feels wrong and continue to be a part of it because, hi, cult manipulation.
Right.
So it's not just being blinded to everything, it's continuing against your inner knowing and continuing in spite of being uncomfortable, because you're being told that being uncomfortable is part of the process.
Yeah.
And so it's not just like, oh, I was having a grand old time and didn't notice a thing. Yeah, a lot of people notice the red flags, but they've been brainwashed and manipulated into pushing against that and ignoring it. And it's part of the whole process. It's by design that they get you to that place. Going back to the spiritual manipulation with these events, you get someone, especially a young impressionable teen, into the headspace of complete submission by breaking them down to a point of sobbing and full obedience. And then you tell them what to do. And they're going to do it because you've gotten them in that position where they're open and malleable and willing to accept any consequence based on what you're telling them. And so that's really what I think people need to pay attention to. It's not that you just didn't understand or know what was going on. It's that you continued in spite of those feelings.
Yeah. And that they're so good at making it your whole world that it's never just, oh, I'm going to leave this idea behind, or I'm going to change my mind. Like I was just talking about that you can change your mind, but like it requires so much, because if it's everything, if it's your social life, if it's your moral support, if it's the people who know you the best, if it's your identity, I think people are very willing to put up with a lot of things because of their identity. And because you go, okay, this is the hard part about this is the hard part about being involved in this group or this organization or this movement or this, and a lot of times it's worth it, but it gets real hard when your whole life is wrapped up in something. So, and I know that's the kind of thing you discuss. So
Yeah, that's the same. That's a different side of it, though, right? Because I was talking about the mentality when you're in it, but the mentality leaving is you lose your identity, you lose your
Mhm.
community. It's the loss. There is always a cost that comes with leaving a high control group, which is why it's so difficult. And part of the cost is being able to hold up a mirror to yourself
Mhm.
and say, what did I miss? What did I fall for? What is not my own thinking? What has been programmed into me? What is reality? You really question your entire reality. It's not just these tenets that were given to you. It's, wait a second, I've been wrong before. What else was I wrong about?
Yeah. What can I hold on to if I have to let go of so many things?
Yep. So let's talk about how you are now and what brings
Yeah.
you happiness and peace and all those things.
I was an English professor for a really long time, and a few years ago, I transitioned to a fully freelance lifestyle. So I do content marketing, and I teach charcuterie workshops, and I teach spiritual
Ooh,
writing workshops online, and I teach feminist history to kids online. I mean, I
nice.
I do writing mentoring. I just have this very I have a hard time saying, what do you do? When people are like, what do you do? I'm like, well, I kind of do whatever I want that pays me.
That's amazing.
And yeah, so I love it. And it has brought me a lot of freedom in terms of being able to really enjoy things. I live kind of in the woods, and I spend a lot of time just walking around on this one little path. It's not very big, but I have this one little path, and I love knowing every tree and what it looks like, and any limbs that fall down and any changes, and oh my gosh, we're getting new silver maples over here, and this one's gonna grow here, and what's wrong with the buckeyes? We need to figure out what's wrong with the buckeye trees this year. I just get a lot of joy in spending time in the nature that surrounds me. And travel, I had the opportunity last year to take my kids to Europe for 2 months because I want to give them those travel experiences that shaped me, but without the
Without the culty
oppression,
audacity.
without the culty audacity, without the pressure, without the like. You're just seeing the world because it's beautiful and because there are wonderful cultures in it that you can observe and respectfully and engage with, and so I'm I feel like I'm in a good place in terms of with my family and my career, and with things like that.
Yeah, amazing. Well, this has
Yeah.
been awesome. Now I just need your Linda listen moment, your sassy statement.
So I think I will actually direct this to pretty much all the leadership at Teen Mania. I think you had so much power and authority in so many of our lives, and I think you mishandled it.
Mm.
I think you were willing to let some people get really, really, really hurt and be the collateral if you had money coming in, people coming in, and if you felt like your mission was being reached. And I don't really know if that mission was making money and having a career and being successful and being respected, or if that mission was really, from your perspective, getting people saved. I don't know. But the sacrifices, we were taught all the time, sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. You don't sacrifice people. You don't. That was wrong, and it was wrong to sacrifice people, sacrifice their bodies and their spirits and their minds because they didn't fit the mold, or because they didn't look right, or because they didn't act right, or because they weren't exactly what you were looking for. And I think that throwing away all of those people was the undoing. Like, you can't keep throwing away people constantly and not expect that to eventually come back and get you, because it did. And then now the organization doesn't exist and your reputations are shit. So
Humans are not expendable for whatever the reason you have money,
yeah.
power, or God. Humans should never be the sacrifice. I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Amazing. Where can people find you and reach out to you and support you?
On TikTok, you can find me at Liz Boltz. On Instagram, I am Liz Boltz Ranfeld, and you can also find me and my spiritual writing classes, which are all online, at lizbr.com.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Liz, for coming on and sharing with us.
Thank you so much for welcoming me and inviting me, and I've had a really good talk. Thank you.
Of course. Any other final thoughts before we go?
No, this is great. Sorry,
No?
this is
Okay.
good. I feel
All
like we
right.
covered a lot. Thank you.
Perfect. You're welcome. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to leave those words of encouragement down below for Liz. It boosts the algorithm. It's the best way to support the podcast and our guests who are coming on and sharing with us. If you want to support further, we do have a Patreon at patreon.com/cults2consciousness. We have some merch at cults2consciousness.com. Things like "I'm sorry for what I said when I was in a cult" tends to be the best-selling t-shirt. And if you like this video, subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss those episodes, and we'll link 2 more down here below that you can check out. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.